23andMe is a public company, with Anne Wojcicki becoming part of the less than 1% of companies that have gone public with a female leader. Anne, we are so thrilled to have you with us here today as we celebrate 10 years of the Disruptor 50. I want to start off by just talking about all the odds that you have defied, particularly when it came to that regulatory challenge. I remember thinking, is this company going to make it? Does it make sense to keep trying to navigate these waters? What made you decide to try to work within the FDA's restrictions and find a way to keep operating?
That is a great question. For one, I'm very persistent. And I think that a lot of founders, when you have a vision and you have, a vision for what you want to achieve, in some ways, like, these things just look like small obstacles. So for me, the FDA was obviously a significant hurdle. There was the article 23 and Stupid that came out. But for me, it was always like, the world is going to evolve where people, all of us as consumers, we have the ability to get more direct access to our health information. And what the most important thing that 23andMe proved out in that FDA process is that the consumer can actually get complicated genetic information without having to have a clinician pre-approve it and on the end, help review the results. That people are in fact capable of getting this information on their own. So for me, it was a win for 23andMe, but most importantly, what we really fought for was a win for the consumer, that you are actually more capable than anyone in the healthcare system believes.
Yeah, it's so interesting because what you're offering used to be something that only very few people could afford to get, or as a sort of elite medical offering. But you're very much interested in having this very broadly accessible but lower margin business. Talk to me about the importance of really having that broad accessibility.
Well, I think a lot of healthcare, if you want to really change healthcare, it has to be accessible. So the core tenets of 23andMe, when you look at our mission about help people access, understand, and benefit from the human genome, was really about how do I take this incredible technology, being access to your DNA, and how am I going to bring this broadly to individuals? And I saw other models in countries like India and Brazil where they actually had direct access businesses that were lower margins, but they had a much higher volume. And I realized that was something that I think you could potentially do. One thing that's very unique about 23andMe is there's no middlemen in our business. I sell directly to consumers. That's all there is. There's no insurance company, there's no PBM, there's no distributor. It's just a direct connection. And so for that reason, I can actually have a much more affordable product. But the goal was really to say, how do I make something that's easy for people to understand and is going to be really accessible to everybody, so that there's no insurance barriers, there's no economic barriers, that majority of people can afford it and get access to it.
Yeah, it's interesting because watching how much the company has evolved since you founded it, I believe 18 years ago, and then also how much you have evolved as a leader running this different kind of company. How have you thought about having 23andMe change from being really a disruptor to more of a partner to the establishment?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that the number one goal I said is you have no chance of really disrupting healthcare until you have scale. So I think it's one thing, even you look at the partnership between, Amazon and JP Morgan, all these things are really hard to significantly disrupt until you have scale. So the number one priority for 23andMe was how am I going to get enough size and scale that people actually have to look at us as a real force and a real player in healthcare. So now we have over 13 million people who all have their genetic information. I know, for instance, that these people are all taking their information to their clinicians. I now am forcing the conversation about how is genetics going to be used in a care setting. And so the next phase of the company is really the last part of our mission, that word benefit. How am I going to help millions and millions of people get access to their genetic information and now benefit from that? And that was precisely why we bought the company Lemonade, where we can now have a clinical team, I can have a pharmacy team, and I'm going to pioneer really how we're going to be able to connect the 23andMe ecosystem with the traditional healthcare world.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that acquisition, because it really seems like you're moving towards almost like a verticalization of the way you're enabling people to get the information and then go through every part of the process, even ultimately getting pharmaceuticals based on that, based on their genetic data.
Right.
Where does Lemonade fit in, and how important is that for the company's evolution?
I think it's really important, and I think there's a really interesting big picture question for people to ask. Like, the genome was first sequenced over 20 years ago. So why is it not part of primary care? Like, I think it's a really interesting question for people to ask. Like, there's an affordable, inexpensive technology, and it's not widely accessible. Yet there's all kinds of really valid clinical reasons why you potentially want to use and look at your genetic information. And that could be pharmacogenetics, it could be the carrier status, it could be, the cancer reports like the BRCA, there's hereditary prostate cancer, hereditary colon cancer. There's all kinds of incredibly meaningful, clinically validated reports that people should be getting access to. And by getting access to those, you are going to save lives and improve lives. So I think there's a huge question about why it's not being adopted. And one thing I think 23andMe has recognized over the last 16 years is that people get their genetic information and then they take it to the medical world, and the medical world is not trained about how to use genetic information, exactly what are the right protocols, what to do with it. So we spent lots of time, developing medical courses and working to train physicians. But ultimately, we realized if we want to help our customers really benefit from the human genome, we need to have our own care team. And so 23andMe acquired Lemonade with the idea that we're going to have our own care team who can answer questions, help navigate care, help understand what do you do when you have a variant for the BRCA mutation? Who should you talk to? How should you follow up? Also on pharmacy, if you have a variant and you're an ultrametabolizer and you are taking a medication like Lipitor, what should you do? And so that's where the integrated system is really important for us to complete that entire loop. And we decided we had to do that because I found the rest of the healthcare system was not widely adopting genetic information. So we need to own that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Then, of course, your partnership with GSK is another piece of this. Explain to that how that fits into this broader portfolio of what you're building out.
Well, that's another whole fascinating part of, I think, about consumer empowerment, is that all of us recognize that we go to the physician sometimes, or we go to the healthcare system, and that you reach a dead end. They don't know how to treat something. It's a lot of side effects with the medication. So, or they just don't have answers for us. And so the beauty for me with the genome was this has this ability to help us change how we predict, prevent, and treat all human disease. And so the idea of 23andMe from the very earliest days was, how do I give consumers this choice and an option about opting in to a research experience? So how is it you can say, I want to contribute my genetic information and my phenotypic data, meaning all the survey questions that people have answered, to this community where we are doing research on all kinds of conditions, thousands of different conditions. And what you find is that you have people who have Parkinson's or autoimmune disease who can help people who have cancer or neurological conditions. So having this database of individuals who have all kinds of different conditions, we can make genetic discoveries on all various areas of diseases. So we now have over 200 publications that have come out. And we decided also in 2015 that there was enough excitement about all that potential for discovery that we should actually start a therapeutics division of 23andMe. So we hired a team from Genentech, we brought people in, we've been looking at all those associations that we can discover, and we now have over 50 programs. We have 2 that are in the clinic, 2 actually immuno-oncology programs that are in the clinic, and we've had this big partnership now with GSK on how can we actually look at all this genetic data and turn those into therapeutic programs that will ultimately benefit our customers.
With what you're talking about with GSK and with Lemonade, what I'm hearing from you is this new vision for what personalized healthcare should look like. How do you see the healthcare system evolving, or how do you think it should evolve so 10 years from now people are really able to get personalized care? What does that look like, and where do you fit into that?
Well, I think what's exciting is that people now understand this concept of personalization. Like, all our experience, if you surveyed everyone who's listening about their Netflix account, everyone's going to have a different kind of Netflix experience. So we understand this concept that we're all different, we all live our lives in different ways, and you all have different genetic predispositions. So how is it that we can all have a very unique healthcare experience? So right now, for instance, if you look at the preventative guidelines, so when should you get a colonoscopy? When should you get a mammogram? All of that is the exact same for every single one of us. So when I think about the opportunities is how is it that we can have really like truly personalized prevention, personalized primary care. So when I walk in and I could say, okay, you're higher risk for atrial fibrillation. How should I be living my life? Like, are there things I could do with how I exercise, how I eat, how I like the environment I'm living in? What are the things that I could do to potentially change? It could be high risk for something like chronic kidney disease. Do you better manage your blood pressure in certain ways to try and prevent that? So, or you could have a high risk factor for cancer, like the BRCA variant. Do you want to then get screened, or do you want to do a prophylactic mastectomy? There's a lot of ways that you'll be able to have very personalized care based on how you're living your life, as well as what your fundamental genetic makeup is. And based on that genetic makeup, we're going to be able to give you more personalized recommendations.
Well,
so I do think there's a whole new world that's coming. I'm really excited about it because it will mean that not everyone has to have the exact same set of recommendations.
I can't wait for that time. I hope it comes soon. And it raises my next question. Do you think the pandemic raised awareness in the broader healthcare community and the biotech community about the importance of doing what you're doing? And do you think that coming out of the pandemic, there's going to be faster change?
I think that the most important thing that the pandemic did is it made telemedicine normal. Like when I think about all the changes, like it raised awareness about, diseases and pandemics and other health-related issues. But the most important legacy consequence is that it made people realize that you can get your care in a very easy manner on your phone in a self-service. Like people all want instant, like I no longer ever want to go to the grocery store, I want it delivered to me. And guess what? Now I can also get my healthcare in that same way. I think people saw that opportunity and they are not going back. So that normalization of telemedicine, I think, is like an absolutely game changer for the entire healthcare industry. And I hope that the entire industry really adopts that kind of like ease and convenience and affordability for people. I think it definitely, we saw during the pandemic, people definitely were aware, more interested in their health, more interested in genetics. And I think that's also a huge opportunity for all of healthcare participants to like leverage that people are suddenly looking around and saying like, okay, what can I do to be healthy? And what are those measures and tasks? Like what is science and how do I engage with it?
Well, Anne, we've talked so much about the future of healthcare, but I have to ask about your role running a public company. There are so many CEOs of the Disruptor 50 companies that don't stay on to run the company once it goes public. And oftentimes they either hand the reins over to someone else or they simply aren't interested in that kind of a job of running the company. Once it's public and they're dealing with the quarterly reports, how do you find your role has changed? And what maybe would be some advice to other disruptors looking to make that transition as well?
I think that the most important thing that I have this incredible luxury in that I love what I do. Like hands down, like I think every single day, like I'm lucky that I deal with interesting problems. I have a really exciting opportunity. So like I think every day about how lucky I am. But I couldn't do that without a team that also handles some of the things that I'm less excited about. So having the right team around me has enabled me to then like really think every day about how much I love what I'm doing. So the advice I would have to individuals is like, it's all about the team around you and really empowering and trusting those individuals to be able to run with their programs and to thrive. It's absolutely about the team. So I have a Wall Street background. It has been a real pleasure for me to now interact with my friends on a different side. And I think that being public is it's a great honor. So I don't mind the quarterly earnings. It's really just about making sure that we have the right infrastructure in place to be able to manage it.
But the market has plummeted so much since you went public. We've seen all the companies in sectors such as yours suffer. Has that been a hard thing to navigate?
Well, I think, look, my training, so I was originally trained as a Wall Street analyst working for the Wallenberg family in Sweden. And I remember them telling me, like, Anne, everything goes on sale once a year and you need to have a long-term vision. Like a lot of the, great opportunities they had were based on sort of that long-term vision. So I try to tell people, like, when we went public, we were doing X number of things, and we're doing even more things today, but the markets have changed. And so we're kind of a small ship floating in a sea that happens to be very turbulent right now. So you need to keep employees and you need to keep everyone focused on the long term, because the unbelievable opportunity we have with, the opportunities with genetics, with like telemedicine care, where you can go with actually data and what you can, learn from, large data sets and involving genetics is huge. Like, it's a really exciting opportunity that we have in all those areas. So keeping people focused on the long term is really key. And again, for me, everything I do, like, I have really a 30-year vision for 23andMe, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm super excited about this. Like, keep people long term on the vision. And frankly, 23andMe is an incredibly interesting, scientific, innovative place to be. And so that alone is what keeps my employees really motivated.